Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Vice President, now the Chancellor, has tonight hinted that he is in a listening mode as Tory backbenchers express concerns over planned rises to business rates. Addressing the influential 1922 committee just 2 weeks ahead of the budget, Philip Hammond told MPs he was alive to their concerns, but he stopped short of promising changes. With Tory heartlands amongst the areas facing the highest rate rises, our business editor Siobhan Kennedy has been to the Chancellor's constituency in Weybridge.
Cafe culture in the commuter belt of leafy Surrey. But amid the cappuccinos and carrot cake, today a dire warning from the boss of Café Rouge that investment in his chain could be severely dented and even taken overseas unless the government changes tack on business rates. Simon Wilkinson is a restaurateur of 30 years and says the rate increases coming into effect in April amount to a tax on success.
You know, I am personally looking at cutting back on my expansion plans. I'm looking at going overseas. We will be opening a Café Rouge in Saudi Arabia within the next 12 months. And we're getting, contacted by many countries who want us to take our business over there, and that's not good for the UK economy.
And you're saying that you would choose to do that there rather than here?
If it continues and if there isn't a rethink, absolutely, we've got to look at our position. I think because we are growing and because we are, being successful, that the government are now taxing us for our success.
These business rate increases have businesses large and small really vexed. The increases are too punitive, they say, and they're being introduced too quickly. And the problem for politicians, Conservative politicians, is that the areas that are hardest hit appear to be places like this, in Weybridge in Surrey, which just happens to be the constituency of Philip Hammond, the Chancellor. Now, the government says that there's been a relentless campaign of distortions and half-truths. Are you talking distortions and half-truths?
Absolutely not. I'm very straight talking. I'm not a politician. The restaurant industry are seeing an average of 23% rise in rates. That is the facts. There's no distortion there. You walk down High Street of many towns and they've got shops that are closing. We are investing as an industry. We are opening restaurants. We are opening pubs. And to penalise people who are trying to help the economy and employment and apprentice schemes and help the local economy, I think, is a very negative aspect.
Business rates are linked to the value of the property. They're meant to be recalculated every 5 years, but this one has been delayed for 7, producing some rather striking increases. Café Rouge branches in the east of England will see a 14% hike in business rates over 5 years. In the north, the rise is 39%, and in London, it's 45%. But here in Weybridge, it's 49%. Tonight, a source close to the Treasury said the Chancellor was now in listening mode about business rates. And while it believes it did consult widely, Mr Hammond is emphasising that he does understand the challenges the changes will pose. Those challenges are writ large at this independent tea shop in his constituency, whose owner fears she could go under as a result of the government's policy. How worried are you about business rates increasing?
I'm actually very worried. I was reading yesterday about it. We don't know what's going to happen. Every penny counts in this sort of business, and because we're so small, we don't have the backup. We're not a chain, so we can't rely on one of our other shops. So it is very, very worrying.
Are you worried that if it's a big increase, it could potentially put you out of business?
Yes, it will put us out of business, without further doubt.
Words that will likely ring in the ears of Philip Hammond as he prepares his budget due in 2 weeks. With so many demands being placed upon him, from business rates to Britain's creaking social care, he must decide who gets served first.
Well, with me in the studio is Labour's former Shadow Business Secretary, Angela Eagle, and we're joined from Westminster by the former Conservative Minister and Party Chairman, Grant Shapps. Grant Shapps, let me start with you. Ministers have said there's been a relentless campaign of distortions and half-truths. You've queried the revaluation, so have you fallen for fake news there?
Well, I don't think it's all that helpful actually to sort of blame the media for highlighting problems with this revaluation. The fundamental problem is we just haven't had one for such a long period of time that, of course, if you bought anything 7 years later, it's then much more expensive. I'm very concerned about it. I actually don't think it's going to go down well because people are not expecting these rises. And I think we need to look at a fundamental review of the way that we're doing this whole business rates thing.
So the fact that the Chancellor says he's in listening mode is appealing to you then?
Well, look, I was at that meeting and I put the points to him that I'm very concerned about this revaluation. We've had these figures which show that much of the country apparently gets a reduction, but actually when you dig into the figures, those figures have been assumed by the Treasury only after appeals have taken place. And last week I heard ministers talk about how bad it was that these appeals take place all the time. They talked about some ambulance chasing companies who go out and constantly help businesses to appeal their rates. Well, I've been in my printing business for 26 years, and I know that when I used to work there, we regularly had to appeal the rates, and we used to win those appeals because the valuation office would get them wrong in the first place.
Right.
So I think that, together with this big increase, makes you think there's something wrong with the system in the first place.
Angela Eagle, do you agree there's something wrong with the system? Or, I mean, are you concerned that 500,000 businesses face a higher bill? Some of those rates are rising by 300%. That's according to the Federation of Small Business.
I think
are you happy to inflict that on business?
I think it is an issue, but I'm astonished to hear Grant Shapps talk about it since he was in the government and in the cabinet when they decided to put off the revaluation of business rates, which was due, as it happens, a month before the last general election. So they put it off for 2 years, and now he's complaining about the large rises. So that's one issue. On business rates itself, at the last election, the Labour Party said that we would actually not reduce corporation tax, and we'd use that money to freeze and then reduce business rates, particularly at the small business end, which I think would have helped.
Is that still your policy?
Well, that's what we would have done, but I think
what is Labour's policy now?
I think that there's a wider issue here with the sustainability of business rates in areas such as internet businesses, which don't pay rates. It impacts on the high street, which does pay rates. The whole base of how we do this now needs looking at again. So
well,
if
what
I'm
is
going to
Labour's
agree
policy
with
now, though?
Grant Shapps about anything, it's that I think we need to have much more sustainable ways of taxing so that we can pay for our public services, taxing business going forwards.
OK, come back to that, but in a sentence, what is Labour's policy on business rates now?
Well, we said at the election that we would not have a reduction in corporation tax because we thought that was going to the wrong place, that we would recycle that money and freeze and then reduce business rates, particularly for small business.
Let me put your public services point to Grant Shapps, because we've heard these figures today about the NHS deficit. Isn't it right to argue that businesses should shoulder some higher taxes to help plug that hole?
Well, I don't disagree that businesses should shoulder the taxes. The specific point I was making, I'm absolutely not trying to make this a party political point. When we had the same issue with, for example, council tax, so domestic rates, if you like. What we decided to do was not to do the revaluation in England. They did it in Wales. It was a huge problem. We decided not to do it in England. I think it would have been better not to have gone down this path in England for business rates, and that's really the point that I'm arguing. But yeah, of course, businesses, everyone's got to pay for the services we receive. I just think this has highlighted the extent to which the way that we're doing it at the moment really isn't working, either for business or for the country.
Well, I think it's not sensible to have property taxes if you're not going to revalue as property prices.
Very briefly, we've got not much time left. Are you saying that Labour is saying that you should raise business taxes to plug this hole in the NHS?
Well, that was our policy. There are other ways, not to plug the hole in the NHS, but to make sure that you use business rates to encourage small business at the lower end, the smaller ones, that it's harder for them to actually pay their way with these huge increases that we're getting, and we need a vibrant high street. On the NHS, I think that when Labour were in power, we had a national insurance increase of 1%, and we tripled the amount of money we spent on the NHS and got it up to the EU average.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but Angela Eagle and Grant Shapps, thank you very much for joining us.
I've been getting away with it all